What's up everybody, welcome back to another video. This time around we're going to look at some of the decks from Cyberstorm Access in a little bit more detail, which is some feedback that I got from my last video is that, I ranked these decks, but like how do they actually function? How would they look for us in the TCG? And while of course I'm also new to those decks, I have not of course mastered those as to the extent that I would have liked, but I have my first draft of lists for each of those individual decks. So we're going to look at the 3 decks that I think are going to be the most promising from that set, which is purely Super Heavy Samurai and Vanadium. And without further ado, let's get right in. Before we do though, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'd really appreciate if you did. If you enjoy the content, let me know in the comments down below, all that good stuff. But let us start with those decks from Cyberstorm Access so y'all can get ready. All right. First things first, we have Purely, a deck that I personally like a lot. I think it's quite interactive, and I think that's cool. It has a lot of hand traps. The idea behind Purely, it doesn't actually get that much new stuff. So if you've already looked into Purely beforehand, then it's not that much new you need to learn. But if you haven't, very quickly, the gist of Purely is that they have these memory quick play spells, which all have 3 parts, basically. They have a primary effect, which usually is negligible in most situations. Then they have that effect where you can discard a card and summon one of your Purely main deck monsters from the main deck. And they all have an effect when they're attached to a Purely XYZ monster that they basically inherit to the monster. The main deck monsters are, previously there was only one, which is the way you go into your XYZ monsters, which is by revealing a memory from your hand and summon a corresponding monster from your extra deck. We also get a new Purely effect monster, which is the by far better one, which lets you on summon add a Purely card from deck to your hand. That's not a quick play spell. And take a Purely memory from the grave and summon an XYZ from the extra deck that mentions the memory and have it as material attached. That's all what it's about, right? You have these memories either in hand or grave, because this one summons the XYZ with a memory card from your hand. This one summons one with the memory card from your graveyard, which is strictly better, but this one's once per turn, this one isn't. That's basically the gist of it. Yeah, you summon different XYZ monsters by attaching different memories, and you gain bonuses from that, and all of your spells are also extenders. Simple as that. Why does this deck get good after Cyberstorm Access? It's because of this new memory card. The effect that it gives to the monster, once per turn, during your opponent's standby phase, you can draw a card. That's the effect that the XYZ monster this is attached to has. Now, the reason why this is so good is because this is not once per turn. So if you attach multiple copies of Sleepy Memory to an XYZ, you draw 1 card for each of them. That's not all. Purely has a trap card called Purely Leap, which lets you basically rank up an XYZ into a different rank XYZ. So if you have one of the rank 2 XYZ Purelis, you can rank it up into one of the rank 7s. And if you do all that in your opponent's standby phase, you get to use these effects again because it's considered a new monster. So if I have a rank 2 XYZ with the Sleepy Memory attached, I can draw a card during my opponent's standby phase, then rank up into the rank 7, and then draw again for each Sleepy Memory. So if I have 1 Sleepy Memory attached, I'm drawing 2 cards. If I have 2 attached, I'm drawing 4 cards. If I have all 3 attached, which you can do, you draw 6 cards during your opponent's standby phase. So obviously Purely is a deck that wants to play a lot of hand traps, which is why in this example build here we have 9 hand traps, and specifically that's also the reason why you play Effect Veiler, because you can draw it on your opponent's turn and immediately use it. It's also not once per turn, so you can draw multiples and that's fine. The XYZ you rank up into is X Purely Noir almost all the time. This card is crazy. It is unaffected while it has 5 or more materials, which is very easy to do in Purely, and you can detach 2 materials to spin a card your opponent controls to the bottom of the deck. That's not once per turn, so if you make this thing with 8 materials, it can spin 4 cards. And it's affected after you go down under 5 materials, but at the beginning of the turn, it's usually going to be unaffected. So you basically have unaffected towers, boss monster that can spin multiple cards, and you refill your hand with hand traps and follow up for next turn. Very interesting concept in my opinion. The small XYZs, they're all okay. Plump is the best one because it lets you attach spells and traps from the graveyard, which is how you get the Sleepy Memories under your XYZs constantly, like even if they end up in the graveyard. Beauty is an effect negation. Happiness is very good going second because it can attack multiple times by searching a happy memory over and over and over again. That's a combo I've showed off in a video back when Amazing Defenders dropped. I don't want to get into too much detail, but now I think you know how the deck roughly functions. There's no standard combo for Purely, similar to like Runic decks, because all these cards essentially function the same way. They all summon your your main deck monsters from the deck, and then it depends a lot on what you get from Purely, because when Purely is summoned, you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck and add a Purely card among them to your hand. So there's no standard combo line here. All you need to know is that you try to rank up into Plump on turn 1, attach spells from your graveyard as much as you can, set up as many Sleepy Memories as you can under your XYZ, and try to find your Purely Leap, which you can grab off of Purely Lily. That's basically it. The field spell attaches an additional card in your end phase from your deck, so the field spell is basically an additional copy of Sleepy Memory, and your stuff also is incredibly hard to remove because first of all it's unaffected, but my friend Purely and Purely Street also make it so that you get stuff back when your stuff gets removed from the field. Like with Purely Street, it's if a Purely XYZ leaves the field because of an opponent's card, you can special summon a level 1 Purely from deck or grave. And by my friend Purely, if a Purely XYZ control leaves the field, you get to add back up to 3 Purely quick play spells with different names from the graveyard back to your hand. So the deck has very strong grind game, very strong recursion. If it ever gets the setup where it draws multiple cards in your standby phase, it's gonna have a lot of hand traps. So that's the whole gist of Purely. One more thing I want to say, I get this question every time this deck is on screen. Why is there Santa Claus instead of Kaijus? This matters in Purely a lot because this gets summoned to your opponent's field in defense position, so you can crash into it a bunch of times with happiness, attaching more and more happy memories and then making a huge Zeus in main phase 2. But it's also 1200 attack, so if you summon it to your opponent's field in defense position, you can turn it to attack by the help of Purely Beauty. You can then make it unable to be destroyed by battle by Delicious Memory. Delicious Memory makes it unable to be destroyed by battle, and then you can attack into it over and over and over again to actually OTK your opponent. This is why Santa Claus is better in Purely than in other decks. And this is why everyone chooses to play Santa Claus over Kaijus. One last thing, you're pairing the engine with cards like Dark Worlds because all of these cards discard. I've seen people use Volcanic Shell, which I think is also fine because it's also a level 1 that you can normal summon to go into some of the rank 1s alongside your level 1 main deck monsters. You can also use Dangers for like just random pluses off of Nessie and removal off of Bigfoot on the opponent's turn. I've seen people use Rainbow Bridge, which I'm not a huge fan of because it only works once, but you can do it, right? You can use Rainbow Bridge, discard it for one of the Purelies, get a free search for the field spell and another Crystal Beast for a later discard. That works. All those are options. I'm not sure what's going to end up the best yet. I'm using the Dark Worlds for now. I'm happy with them, but the other ones are also quite solid. For Super Heavy Samurai, I think it's best if we start with a replay, and this is not my own replay. It's a replay by someone called Super Peludo. They've made this amazing resource, really. I can't stress this enough. The Earth Machine Super Heavy Samurai spreadsheet, which has all the combos. I cannot possibly show you all this stuff in one video. So instead, huge shout out to them. I'm gonna link this thing in the description down below and show you the, in my opinion, most relevant one card combo that Super Heavy Samurai does, because that's what Super Heavy Samurai is all about. It has some amazing one card combo lines, and therefore can just play a lot of these one card combo starters and pair it with a lot of hand traps. And that's the whole gist of the deck. I'm going to show you a sample deck list in a second, but just know that you can do this combo with one of 12 cards. You have 4 different starters for this combo that you can each run 3 copies of. So 12 cards total will do a combo like this one. So you're going to start in this one with Bike, discard Bike, add Vakaushi from deck to hand. Vakaushi in scale places the other scale, special summons itself. And then you're gonna get the other scale, which adds a Super Heavy Samurai Soul from the deck to the hand, which adds you Soul Piercer, which is a level 4 that whenever it hits the graveyard searches for a Super Heavy Samurai, and that's not once per turn, and you're gonna loop this thing to oblivion, as we're gonna see. We're linking off the Soul Piercer into a Scarecrow, which can revive a Super Heavy Samurai from the grave by discarding a card. That's already the first way we're gonna loop the Soul Piercer. We're gonna trigger the Soul Piercer, add Soul Peacemaker, which you can equip from your hand to a Super Heavy Samurai, tribute it, and then special summon another Super Heavy Samurai from the deck. By the way, these upstarts or goblins are not actually in the deck because you can't play spell and trap cards, or you can't have spell and traps in the graveyard on the first turn. These are just placeholders. Just get that out of the way before someone asks. All right, so we're going to use the Scarecrow and discard a card that is not a spell card, obviously. We're going to discard a monster. Bring back Peacemaker. And then Synchro into Axel Stardust Dragon. This puts this into the scale because when this is synchroed off, it gets put back into the scale. We're going to trigger the Soul Peacemaker as well as the Stardust Dragon to add a Spy from deck to hand, which is just an extender. This makes Barone. So we already have set up scales and a Barone before we've done anything else. We still have 5 cards in hand. We're going to equip the Peacemaker to the Scarecrow. We're going to tribute. And we're going to summon from deck Scales. which is when it's special summoned, revives a Super Heavy Samurai from the graveyard. So here, we're gonna revive our Soul Peacemaker to search once again by linking this into Ballista. There's combo lines that don't use Ballista, but in this one we do use it. Ballista and Soul Peacemaker are gonna trigger. Peacemaker is gonna add another bike, and we're gonna add a gear box from deck to hand, which we can trigger to add the Tunneler. Infinitak Tunneler, which is going to give us insane follow-up. We're going to special this from the hand just to make a Clifford Genius here, because when we summon into these zones now, by Pendulum Summoning, we're going to be able to add a Regulus from deck to hand. We're going to Pendulum Summon here, indicated by the activation of the scales. We're going to Pendulum Summon all 3 monsters from our hand, add with Genius a Regulus. We're going to make a Appaloosa for 3. Bike is going to increase its level. Baron de Fleur is going to pop the equipped Soul Peacemaker. We're then going to search a Gaia booster, which can equip itself from our hand to a Super Heavy Samurai, then special summon itself. So we're going to do that. We're going to make a Borreload Savage, equip the Ballista from earlier. Or the Genius, rather, because it's slightly stronger. And then we're going to use the Tunneler to draw 2 more cards and recycle a lot of our stuff. And this is the basic 1-card combo that I think is the best because it requires you to play the least amount of bricks. There is also a way to do the combo if you draw a box that requires you to use a Gear Gigant X, because you can simply discard the box and then you can add it from graveyard to hand, which also triggers it. So there's that. But for the most part, I'm going to link you the spreadsheet down below because I have not mastered all the combos yet. But this is the rough idea of the deck, is that it is super efficient in its 1 or 2 cards. Honestly, it's crazy that it does this, right? It's crazy that it does this. 1 card leads to 3 Omni Negates, Appaloosa, 5 cards in hand. There's even FTKs with this. You can use Cyberstein and search it with Gear Gigant X and then Pendulum Summon it to summon Exterio. There's a bunch of different combos that you can do. This is an example deck list that I have made on stream. Of course, I'm not running any spell and traps. There's some versions that do run some spell and traps. For example, if you use Cyberstein, you can go into a Sprite combo after all your stuff, and then you put spell and traps into your graveyard after you're done comboing, which technically is possible. I still like the approach of not having any spell and traps, so you have follow-up plays in case your board does get somehow broken. But the basic idea is Bike, Piercer, Wagon, and Vakaushi are your 1-card starters, 12 of them, and the rest is your like kind of some engine requirements, right? You play 1 of the booster, 1 of the Peacemaker, 1 of the Claw, which is another extender, 1 Spy, 1 Scales, and 2 of the big scales, because if you draw 1 and you only play 1, you can't use Vakaushi, which is a big problem. And then the rest is just, you know, you have your 1 of Kaiju that's searchable off of Genius, you have your 1 Regulus, you have your 1 Tunneler for follow-up, and you have a whole bunch of hand traps mixed with it, which is a solid concept. Of course, this exposes some weaknesses if you can't run spell and traps, makes the deck weak to some random stuff, but overall, this is a very solid concept. Just draw your 1-card combo, and mostly those 1-card combos are not even stopped by that many hand traps, right? Droll Lockbird stops this deck, but for the most part, this deck is pretty good against hand traps, also because it does play Gamma, which if you like use Bike to discard, add, and they droll you, you can Gamma that. If you scale and they ogre it, you can Gamma that. So Gamma is a powerhouse in this deck, while also being, of course, one of the best, if not the best hand trap going second. But that's the idea of Super Heavy Samurai. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the concept of a deck like that. I don't think 1 card should do that much, you know? Let me know in the comments down below what you think, but that is basically what Super Heavy Samurai does. Last but not least, we have Mana Dome, and for Mana Dome, honestly, I have not mastered the combos well enough yet. I wish I could show you, like I did for Super Heavy Samurai, a super full combo guide on this deck. To my understanding, this deck has a lot of powerful 2-card combos. It can vary in what it ends on, but basically it makes use of the new Manadium stuff and the old Scareclaw cards really, really well. It makes an easy Baron, easy number 38 because of the Vicious Astrouts, which is a new fusion that you can simply summon from your extra deck by removing from the graveyard a Visa Starfrost and the 1 card with the stat line of the Rhymeheart, Rhinoheart, Rykart variety, of course, yeah. You end on an easy Harbinger because you summon 1 Astrout into the zone of Cross Sheep, bring back some stuff, and then you can later on make this pattern to bring back either the Rhymeheart, Rykart, or Visa Starfrost, depending on what you need. Spam some powerful level 10 Synchros, make a number 38, maybe end on Masquerena as well. The deck can definitely do that, or just Appaloosa. That's basically what the deck does. It's a 2-card combo pile. That's, I think, where the crux suck slice with this deck. It's a lot of powerful 2-card combos. My problem is that's not really a great concept in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just having 2-card combos that end on great boards, because a lot of decks do that. The deck has some problems, I think, with Nibiru. The deck also has problems with follow-up. And the deck plays a bunch of like engine requirements, like the Reich Phobia is something you don't want to draw. But for the most part, I think this deck is a solid tier 2 strategy as soon as Cyberstorm Access drops. And it can fit, as you can see, a solid 12 hand traps, which I think is a solid lineup. The one Prisma, I want to say a few things about Prisma, because I've seen a lot of people hype the Prisma combos in this deck. Yes, Prisma is a 1-card combo in a deck that usually needs 2 cards to play, but I'm not a big fan of committing to Prisma because it dies to a hand trap very easily. I'm still playing 1 because if you draw Rhoda as your only starter card, I think having Prisma as an option is cool, because Reinhardt as your only card will not do a combo on its own. So I like having Prisma in your deck as a one of Rhoda target, but not more than that. Maybe you can play Hero Lives because that gives you a special summon, but I think it's a huge investment to go for 4,000. Gives you potentially some lose conditions in scenarios where you would normally not lose. So I'm not sure if I like Hero Lives, but I definitely like 1 Prisma. I wouldn't go higher than 1 on the Prisma though. I wish I could show you more in-depth combo guides, but this is the deck out of these 3 decks that I have practiced with the least, and I don't want to give you guys suboptimal combo lines. I still think that this is a very solid start for a list if you want to try it, and if you want my opinion on it, I think it's gonna rank somewhere in solid tier 2, because it has good 2-card combos, it can fit a decent amount of hand traps, but it struggles with follow-up, and I don't think it does a lot of things better than some decks we already have. So that's my opinion on Manadome, or Manadium as we should call it now. Those are the introduction, deck lists, first thoughts, some combos on the new stuff from Cyberstorm Access. Let me know what you think of this set. Are you excited for any of these decks? Are you excited for anything else in the set? Is there maybe another thing that I haven't covered yet that you think is definitely worth mentioning in the preparation for Cyberstorm Access? Let me know down in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Without further ado, hope you have a great rest of your day, rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next time. Peace.